This week, we're talking about growth mindset and specifically how it applies to the idea of being a certain kind of person or not.
You are listening to Love Your Job Before You Leave It, the podcast for ambitious, high-achieving women who are ready to stop feeling stressed about work and kiss burnout goodbye forever. Whether you're starting a business or staying in your day job, this show will give you the coaching and guidance you need to start loving your work today. Here's your host, career coach Corey Lynn.
Hello, 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 and happy Wednesday. I've been thinking about this thing I heard, and now I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been on a TikTok, or it might have been from Alex Lucchini, but it was this phrase, feelings are to be felt. And my brain was like, and not fixed, because that's kind of like a common coachy idea. Feelings are meant to be felt, not meant to be fixed, because people try to fix their feelings or, ignore them, avoid them, whatever, make them go away. But that wasn't where the thing went. It said feelings are meant to be felt, not to make decisions from, or something like that. And I thought that was such an interesting idea, because in coaching, we teach this concept that thoughts create feelings and feelings create actions. And I believe that's true. And I've seen that play out in my life and the lives of my clients. But also, I've seen people want to make a certain decision because of how they feel in a way that's more about choice than about that like flow of thought, feeling, action. And that's where I think this idea is really interesting of like, oh, just because you feel a certain way that doesn't decide your choices for you. The feeling exists in your body. It's a physiological experience of an emotion, right? And again, in coaching, we consider those to be kicked off by thoughts. From the science materials that I have read, I do know that your body can also have a bunch of sensations that are not kicked off by thoughts. Like some anxiety is kicked off by how we think about things, and some anxiety can also be kicked off by other things like neurochemicals. But also I've been reading this other book that talks about other things that can create like physical anxiety in the body that is not the same as anxiety that stems from like our mental thought processes. So that's all very interesting. But then also once like something exists, like once a feeling exists, whether the feeling is like anxiety or whether the feeling is love, a lot of us think if we have a certain feeling, it means we have to do a certain thing, or we like have to make the choice, whatever choice we're facing or decision we're coming up with, like from that feeling. And I really like this idea that like once the feeling exists, feel it. Process it, move through the physiological sensation of the feeling. And if it's like a stress response feeling, I have a whole podcast on how to complete a stress response, right? How to complete that physiological process that exists in the body. And then you can like decide what you want to think and feel and how you want to move forward. But I just thought it was like interesting, and I wanted to share it with y'all as like something to like noodle on and think about. But that's not actually what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is growth mindset, which was like very popular a few years ago and something that was really impactful for me. And I think a lot of people were talking about it, like I said, a few years ago, but I think a lot of people aren't talking about it anymore, and it's worth revisiting. And the basic idea is that growth mindset means believing that you have the capacity to grow and change. And the opposite is fixed mindset. And fixed mindset is the idea that like who you are is fixed, like who you are is a certain kind of way, and that way cannot change, or who you are cannot change. And examples are like, I'm good at math or I'm not good at math. Both of those would be fixed mindset. One would be like a positive fixed mindset, I'm good at math. And one would be a negative fixed mindset, I'm bad at math. Whereas growth mindset is like, I can become good at math. I'm able to build this skill, whether I have it now or not. And there is something in here about the difference between, thinking about like things in terms of like natural talent versus thinking in terms of like learned skills. And I do think in life, sometimes we have natural talents in certain areas and sometimes we don't. But I often wonder, like, by the time we quote unquote discover a natural talent, is it actually a natural talent? Or like, is it something we learned to do earlier, but we weren't aware we were learning to do it? And so by the time we notice it, like we think it's a natural talent. Like I was always really good in school, but actually I wasn't, because when I first went to school, I first went to public school in second grade at the age of 8. And at first, because I'd never been schooled before, like I'd been homeschooled technically, I didn't do well. I did really poorly at first, but like then I overcame that and I figured out how to like succeed at this thing called school. And once I did that, I switched to like a new fixed mindset story of I'm good at school versus like I learned to become good at school. And if I can learn to become good at school, I can learn to become good at fucking anything. So it is interesting, even though I had a growth experience, I'm pretty sure that I thought about it in a fixed way. And if you want to learn more about this idea of growth mindset and fixed mindset, I would strongly encourage you to read the book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success by Carol S. Dweck, because it's a great book with like lots of information about like the science and the studies and all that stuff. Whereas I'm going to just give you like the colloquial talking on the podcast as per usual. Okay, so specifically what I want to talk about today is growth mindset plus this idea of like, I'm the kind of person who, or I'm not the kind of person who, because we get these ideas about like who we are as people and what's available to us and like what kind of things we can accomplish and what kind of things we can't accomplish. And I see this a lot in many areas, but especially in career. Like, oh, I'm the kind of person who this, and like I'm the kind of person who that, and like, oh, I'm not the kind of person who could jump industries, or I'm not the kind of person who could negotiate a $25,000 raise, or I'm not the kind of person who could launch a successful side hustle. And another thing I think is like on the podcast, we're talking all the time about all these like tools and teachings and things that you could use to create a career in life that's like more compelling for you and more satisfying for you and more of what you want to have going on. But I was wondering, I was like, I wonder if there are people out there who are listening to the podcast and like inspired and excited by the ideas, but believing that they're not the kind of person who could apply them, or believing that like these tools and ideas are for other people, or like believing that what I'm talking about isn't available to them. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is how like there's not a kind of person for whom coaching works. Coaching is a tool that many different people can use. And like, it might feel weird to you at first, or like it might feel alien. It might not be like anything else you've done. It might be like when I went to public school at age 8 and was in second grade. And like by second grade, everyone else knew what the fuck they were doing. They were like, this is school. You like raise your hand, you like do these things, you like have your address memorized. And I rolled up in there and I had no idea what was happening. I didn't understand the systems and the processes. I didn't have my address memorized. When they told me I had to like ask permission to go to the bathroom, I like laughed at them because I thought it was a joke, because I had had such bodily autonomy up until that point in my life that I thought that was absurd at 8 years old. And I mean, asterisk, I didn't have total bodily autonomy, of course. Like I was a child and made to do all kinds of things, but I had bodily autonomy over like when I went to the bathroom. So like, just that's an example. So anyways, like just because we've never done something before doesn't mean we can't do it. So many people are looking to their past to see like what they're capable of. And there is like sort of a kind of logic about like, look at what's happened before to see what could happen again. And it's not that that's wrong, but that's only one view, right? And if you don't want to repeat the past, if you don't want to keep doing what you've been doing, then I would argue that that's not the evidence I would look for or the story I would tell myself. And instead, you can tell yourself the story of like, yeah, just because I've done it one way forever doesn't mean I have to. And just because in the past I saw myself as someone who couldn't, move across the country and take a job in an entirely new sector in an entirely new city doesn't mean I can't do that. And where this ties back into growth mindset is the idea that like who you are is not fixed. Who you are is not predetermined. Who you are is available to growth. Who you are can change. You can change who you are. You can change the way you show up to the world. You can change not only what you want out of your career, but how you show up to your career, how seriously you do or don't take your career. You can become a person who sets boundaries. You can become a person who stops overworking. You can become a person who says no to extra work or tasks or activities or whatever. And so like the basis of it, I guess it's kind of a really simple basis. The basis of this whole podcast episode is that who you are is not fixed. You are not stuck being who you've been. You get to decide who you want to be. Now, let's be honest, deciding to become someone different and do a new thing may feel wildly uncomfortable. Again, when I went to second grade, that felt wildly uncomfortable. Honestly, if I had like had a choice, I probably would have tried not to do it. But as an 8-year-old, I didn't have a choice, or at least, I guess I probably did, but I wasn't aware of them. I thought I had to do whatever I was told. So I just did it. Right. And like, it wasn't pleasant, y'all. There's a lot of the memories from that time are not very fun. But realizing the capacity I do have to grow and change, and I didn't even see that then. I didn't see it for such a long time. But now that I see it, that's such a superpower. And even if you don't see that in your past, first of all, it doesn't mean it's not there, because again, we have confirmation bias as humans. So we see what we look for. We see evidence for what we already believe. So if you believe you've always been the kind of person who, you'll see that in your past, even if there's evidence of the opposite. But even if you can't find evidence in the past, like who cares? You can change now. But again, it may be uncomfortable. It may require you doing stuff you've never done before. It may involve that phrase of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. A lot of times when we're learning to do something new that we don't have practice in yet, there's going to be failure. There's going to be bumbling. There's going to be us not really knowing the steps yet, because it's a dance we've never done before. And so at this point, you may be thinking, I'm not the kind of person who learns new dance steps. I'm not the kind of person who changes. But again, just because you haven't been that person doesn't mean you can't be. And listen, life is long for a lot of us, right? I don't know what the life expectancy is now, but I sort of expect that I'm probably going to live to 100. I'm about to be 38. And so I'm that's 62 more years. That's so much fucking time. That's so much time for me to try new things and build different kind of businesses and live in different places. It's so much time that I don't have to spend doing things the way I've always done them. It's so much time during which I could grow into new ways of being as a person, as a business owner, as a partner, as a friend. And I think sometimes we live in a very youth obsessed culture, a lot of us. And I think sometimes we're oh, well, I'm 30, I'm 35, I'm 40, I'm 45. I'm trapped now. I'm stuck in the way I've always been. But that's not true. It doesn't have to be true. Think about it. If I live to 100, I'm not even halfway through my life yet. There's so many decisions still to be made. There's so many things I can still try and do. I could decide tomorrow, I'm a watercolor painter. And if I do live to 100, I have time where I could be a watercolor painter longer than I was not a watercolor painter. So you're not trapped and stuck. Whoever you've been, you don't have to keep being that person. And whatever kind of person you are, that's not real. There is no kind of person you are. You're a person, you have some habits, you have some ways you've been in the past. Your brain probably has a lot of go-to decisions for stuff, but you're not trapped and stuck there. It's not too late. And if you want to be the kind of person who applies coaching and creates amazing things in their life, you can be the kind of person who applies coaching and creates amazing things in their life. If you want to be the kind of person who asks for a $25,000 raise, you can become the kind of person who asks for a $25,000 raise. And then you can stop being that person and become the person who asks for a $50,000 raise. You can become the person who switches industries. You can become the person who goes from being an individual contributor to a director, even though most people are not able to make that leap. You can become the person who invents a new industry. You can become the person who revolutionizes a current industry. Whatever kind of person you want to be, you can become that. But only if you believe you can, and only if you're willing to go through, the effort and discomfort of doing it. And listen, I don't want to lie to y'all. It is effort. It is discomfort. But I assume we're going to be uncomfortable a lot of the time anyways. And life is full of effort, whether you're folding laundry or building a business. So why not have the effort and discomfort create something that blows your fucking mind? Why not? That's my question for you today. If you could be anything, if you could be any kind of person, what kind of person do you want to be? And what are you willing to do to become that person, to build her or him or them? Come tell me about it on Instagram. I want to know. I want to know what your wildest dreams are. And I want to know what little tiny baby steps you're going to start taking to grow into that, to believe you can grow into that. And listen, if you don't want to do this work alone, you don't have to. I want to do this work with you. I want to sit down with you every week and talk about how you're going to blow your own mind and then actually put into place the action steps to create that. to not just dream of the person we're going to become, but to become them. So if you want to come work with me, scoot on over to my website and sign up for a consultation, and let's talk about it. Let's see if it's a good fit, because I know coaching can blow your mind. And if you want to do this work with me, I want to do this work with you. And if it's not me, I can connect you with someone else amazing. I want to see what the world is like when all of us believe we can become who we want to become, and then go forth and do the work and have the fun to create that. All right, that's what I have for y'all this week, y'all. Have a great week. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Love Your Job Before You Leave It. We'll have another episode for you next week. And in the meantime, if you're feeling super fired up, head on over to CoreyLynn.com for more guidance and resources.